Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here. This impromptu live stream. It's been a minute. Thank you so much for stopping in. Thought I'd better jump on and do a live, say hi, give everyone an update on what's happening. There's been quite a bit going on, and just we're hanging here. We're hanging. So, what's been shaking, everyone? I've got to say, been a turn that fella off. Yeah, so thanks everyone for dropping in, and I'm just going to run through a quick couple of things before I get started here. And I've got a big thank you once again to the crew at Violet Flame Studios. Let's see if that pops up like it should. Nope, that's not popping up. Yeah, I want to say a big thanks to Violet Flame. They've been very generous in showing their support for the channel here, and I have, of course, an update. Oh, we get that round on the right way. We'll get rid of that logo. Still figuring out how to do all this stuff. Getting there. All right. So for those of you who have been following the game demo for, let's just make that a solo. The game demo for Ascension: The Immortal Alchemist is now available on Steam. It's free. Free. Everyone loves free stuff, right? So it's free to download, and I've tried it on my old Windows 10 machine, and it kind of worked. But yeah, but it's free, so you don't have to pay for it and then find out later. So go and check it out. It's looking pretty slick, and I know there's an update coming for it soon too. So violetflamestudios.co.nz. You can sign up. Here it is here, the free limited time demo. You want to jump in and have a look. There's a few people reviewing it on YouTube at the moment, and it's pretty fun to watch. I've been a part of this development process, and it's really cool to see something that people can interact with rather than just video footage of gameplay. So thank you once again, Violet Flame, for sponsoring this month's live streaming software. And yeah, go check them out. Okay, right, let's see. Now I have, oh, look at that. I have someone in the chat, and I have someone also waiting backstage. So I'm just going to jump straight in and bring them in. I'm going to pull this banner off. Cool, and I'm going to invite back to the stage a good mate, Mr. Philip Harris Smith.
All right, Phil. Is it on Steam? That game, is it The Immortal Alchemist?
Yeah, so the free demo is on Steam at the moment. So if you type in Immortal Alchemist,
so it's Immortal, not The Immortal Alchemist, Immortal Alchemist.
Yeah, you'll find it under Immortal. The name of the game, the series of games, is called Ascension, and this particular chapter, I believe, is called The Immortal Alchemist, or something of this type. But yeah, it's
my picture's frozen. Sorry about that. I was just changing the screen.
No, that's all good. It should come back. I'll drop you out and bring you back in. It'll reset in a sec. All right. It's doing funny things. Oh well. We'll have Philip back in shortly. So yeah, everyone, you want to go check this out if you've got a machine that's got got the hardware to handle it. It's a lot of fun. It's a platforming type game, and what it allows you to do is it's not so much of a fighting game. There are traps, but there's puzzles, esoteric type puzzles where you have to sort of monitor the environment and get the cues, and you basically got to escape rooms to get to the next area, and there's a way to sort of unlock the door to get through via a number of different ways, depending on, I don't want to give too much away, but there's a lot of exploration. There's a lot of figuring things out, and there's more than one way to exit the room to get to the next area. And the character modeling and the environments and the models and everything and the lighting, it's just, man, it's next level. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun to interact with. Pardon me. Okay. Hey, Brother Philip, I tell you what, man, just try logging out and coming back in again, man. So yeah, I went over the other day and had a bit of a jam on it, and yep, it's challenging. So man, I'm quite bright, aren't I? Let's just tone down my shiny forehead a little. There we go. Hey everyone, thanks for joining in. So yeah, we're just talking about the game that dropped, or the demo that dropped after many years of development, great works and things. The demo, which is there's actually two demos in one. Here he is. There he is. There's actually two demos in one in the game, and essentially there's a training demo, so you can get an idea of what's going on, and then there's also an actual gameplay demo as well, which is more like a set level that you explore and jump around. And there's a lot going on, and there's a lot to do, and it's really predicated on your ability to sort of be aware of the environment, which is, we could sort of say that is sort of parallels the early stages of initiation into hermetics, where you are learning to just observe. And so this is key, because some games you just run around and mash buttons. And for some games, that's fine. For some games, woe is you if you take that attitude towards it, because this is a difficult game. So this will essentially entrain you to be more conscious of how you interact with the environment that you find the player character in. And so, yeah. Anyway, Philip, welcome back, sir. Great to see you, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to keep the thing, pardon me, exactly as is, because it's when I changed to get full screen that things went funny. So I'll just leave it as it is now. I can see you're like a little guy on the right, a little thumbnail, and I'm a little guy on the left. We're both thumbnails at the moment, mate. But that's, if it's working, don't fix it, I guess.
That's it. So what have you been up to? You've been enjoying some...
I've been playing Starfield, and that's what I've been doing. I've been wasting my life. I've been dribbling my life away. I love that game. Everyone disses it. I love it.
I want to get into it. Like, it was on Game Pass on Xbox, and I downloaded it. I've played it a few times.
Oh,
I
mate.
really tried to get into it. I really tried. What am I missing here, man?
Well, it's a different ethos. Like, for example, Cyberpunk is an incredible game, and you've just got to understand that it's a proper golden age, classic Deus ex machina science fiction. It's the classic before authors like Michael Moorcock or the more nihilistic science fantasy started to emerge in the 60s. There was this period from about 1920 or even earlier, E. Doc Smith, all the classic golden age science fiction writers. And it's in that vein. As long as you understand the paradigm and the genre, if that's to your taste, it's great. And that's, when I was in my teens, I was reading a lot of that stuff. I was reading a lot of the more um, science fantasy, not less hard science stuff. No longer Deus ex machina. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you're a science fiction buff. Do you know what I mean by Deus ex machina, mate? I'll explain if you can't remember.
Oh, there's a bit of a large, like, that word can mean a lot of
Yeah.
things to a bunch of people, because there's games. There's Deus Ex, the game series as
Oh
well,
yeah,
isn't
yeah.
there?
I've been playing that
So
a lot. Well, the original one. I can see there's a lot of that doesn't really do Deus Ex Machina. The classic science fiction Deus Ex Machina is there's a problem in the world,
yes,
and they invent a thing, and everybody's happy. That's
right.
the God is in the machine. The machine fixes the world. That's there. So all
Yeah.
the early golden age science fiction stories always had something that would emerge, some development, and everyone would be happy because that solved everyone's problems. That was the classic format of Planet Story, all the early Astounding, all the early American pulp magazines. They'd all have this, and it was only later, when, for example, Michael Moorcock, who I was very fond of, he pointed something out. Before the Soviet Union had much media and cultural input from Western, America and whatnot, their spaceships were lumpy and had bits sticking out of them, and it's only once they started to pay attention to more Western cultural values that their spaceships became more streamlined. They didn't need to be, you know, and Moorcock made that observation and talked about how cultural norms and values affect reality in essence, one way or the other. You know, the Russians had these incredibly early on. They had these incredibly good spaceships, but they didn't look anything like the American ones, which were really streamlined and, to our eyes, more elegant seeming. And then when you could tell the Soviet Union was losing, the Cold War, when their spaceships became more like the American ones, more streamlined, more, you know, and that's kind of where Michael Moorcock talks about things and how reality is more chaotic, and we can shape reality much more than we think we can, which I would agree with. I'm going spinning off in a lot of directions, but hermetics is, there are laws, but we can also shape things, and that's completely different to empiricism, obviously. But anyway, Starfield is, as far as I can tell, it's much more in the vein of the original Golden Age science fiction authors, because they're developing a machine that, is going to solve everything.
So just I just want to quickly say there could be some spoilers here, people. So if
Well, I
you
won't say
haven't
any more
played
than
stuff,
that. The
no, no,
people
no,
who have
no, no,
known
that's
that from
okay.
the promo when it first came out, they'd have
Yeah.
seen all this, strange alien technology
Yes.
in the teaser trailers. So I'm not spoiling anything for you.
No, but I'm just saying, like, I just like speaking candidly because I've played it a bit, and I know you've been playing it, and obviously there's a download pack for it too. And
Oh yeah,
I'm wondering,
that's why I left it go for a few months, and then the DLC came out,
yeah.
and I thought, well, time to get back into Starfield.
And what sort of value has that brought? Have they brought in some new story and
Yeah, it's
sort of
not a lot
immersion?
really. You see, the problem with modern games, and we talked about Deus Ex earlier. The original Deus Ex, I got the game of the year for £6 on Steam a few weeks ago, and it's massive. This game. I mean, the graphics are obviously crude compared to the modern day,
Yeah.
but the game itself is huge. And I just thought to myself, in the modern day, this would be one game and 2 DLCs, and we'd
Yeah.
have to, we'd have to pay £150 overall, something like that. Whereas when I bought that, I remember obviously inflation and all the rest of it, but it came out for I think about £30, and I got it for 15 second hand from a shop. So, and I think that's at the root of it. When people start whinging about these games, well, they're not. There's nothing actually really wrong with the games. That some are good, some are bad. The problem is how much money is being charged, and I think I think about the record industry in the '60s, where it suddenly went very stagnant by the early '70s. Certainly here in the UK, the music scene was dreadful, and then all of a sudden you got punk rock and indie labels, and everything got going again. And I wonder if the game scene is the same. They're drawing too much water from the well. They're charging too much money. The only reason I paid out for this is because I'm in a minority that I really really liked those old golden age science fiction stories, even though they were outdated by the time
Yeah.
I got hold of them. So for me it's great, but I can see why other people, I'm not paying all this money. Eat my shorts, and then
Yeah.
then that gets expressed in an overly fussiness. Because if you look at Starfield, if Starfield was and the DLC had cost half as much as it did, people would be like, yeah, this is okay. I'm quite enjoying this because it costs so much. It's like, this is a bit lame, And I think it's more about the price point and how people are just in games generally are asking too much money at the moment. And that's the real problem at the root of all this controversy that you see online about different games.
Yeah, I mean, like because I follow commentators on the evolution of pop culture, and especially in regards to games and movies and things like that, because it's a very sort of useful barometer to see which way society is heading in. Because obviously, pop culture is highly influential on younger generations, can shape their thinking, their decision making, and also, and to an extent, their political persuasions as well, and how they interact with people in general in society, and that. And so, one thing that Starfield, when I played it, was I think for me, I love open world exploration. I like immersion in a story. I'm an artist, but I'm also a treasure hunter, and I like to go and explore in that. And I mean, the gameplay is pretty damn slick, and it's
Oh
great.
yeah,
It's a first person shooter as well, which is great. Obviously, like the combat in games like the Elder Scrolls is a bit can leave a first person combat can be a little bit left to be desired, but. As far as a space shooter, it's cool to travel between star systems and these types of things. It's very
yeah, it is.
immersive, and and the way it's presented, and it's fluid enough. It's fluid enough, and as far as how this ties back to sort of hermetic practice, and that because it's stimulating and engaging, it brings about for myself anyway, a kind of enjoyable but useful. It's escapism, of course, in a sense, but it's also like it stimulates the imaginative faculties in a positive way, because I'm really engaged in what I'm doing. I'm watching these large areas. I think that's one of the reasons why I like science fiction is because the scope of science fiction. I used to love reading Raymond E. Feist books, or the
Oh
Cromwell
yeah,
series.
yeah. Have you read Magician?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I've got a copy there. Yeah, yeah. It's funny.
He's,
You know, it's funny. Here's a cool story for everyone. So, we have in my family's shopping mall. We have a little mall and have a little village here in Howick, and we've got 3 op shops. We've got 2 in our mall and 1 across. In the bottom op shop, I found a copy of Magician, and I
oh,
read it. I'd already read it, and it was a gold colored one. It's a beautiful cut version of the book, the paperback. And then a few months after I finished that, then the second book, Silverthorn, came up at the next stop shop up. Oh
mm,
yeah, that's pretty fun. And then the last one, I think it's what's it? Not Betrayal. It's I can't remember the name of the third one. It's a Darkness at Sethanon.
that's
That
it.
was
Yeah.
yeah. And then not long after I finished Silverthorn, the third book came out at the next stop shop. And so it was a beautiful little journey, if you will. But with science fiction, now obviously you can do world traveling, and that's somewhat parallels our adventures as magicians in that as well. Is that we'll go exploring new worlds and encountering opportunities for growth and uh, problem solving, I guess, in an angle that you wouldn't, that you kind of it's a different way of sort of angles and perspectives, because it's not sort of solid as such, but it is in a way. But the scope of science fiction is that it seems almost unlimited in its expanse, and it's very relatable, because like a Starfield game, say, versus Mass Effect having a lot of, like, it's a lot like Star Trek, how you've got a lot of alien factions. There's a lot of new cultural sort of like zeitgeist and paradigms to explore. One thing that cracks me up is that when Star Trek, or you go visit a planet full of aliens and they all look the same, and they come to Earth and everyone looks different. I always found that to be quite funny. So when science fiction writers start having factions on a planet with different alien species that look, well, they're alien to us, that look different, that was great to get a bit of diversity and that and there. But with the scope that science fiction offers, because you don't need to explain all the mechanics behind things. You can just have a reverse polarity algorithmicizer or something like this that performs a function. You can have these MacGuffins. You can have them in fantasy too. But as far as a game goes, I think especially after that TV show The Expanse came out, which
Mm,
was a lot more grounded in reality than say something like say Star Trek, or it was from the Earth up, so to speak, or the Earth out, and then they brought in the alien componentry, which is happening in Starfield. So you get this really incredible immersive experience, and there's a hint of alien artifacts and technology which is an exploration pathway as part of the main quest. And so that sort of has this incrementally building intrigue to the game. You're not sort of slapped into this thing like, say, Mass Effect. I don't know, have you played the Mass Effect series?
I'm afraid I have, rather exhaustively. In fact, I even bought the anniversary edition. By the
Oh,
way,
you,
the
yeah,
magician Raymond E. Feist, I would say, and I wrote about this a few years ago, that
yes,
the magic users on the original planet are kind of like the lesser. They call them the lesser path, and to me,
yes,
that's like they use a lot of props and a lot of regalia, so that's like stuff like Golden Dawn. But the really good magicians that came from the other planet, the
yeah,
Black Robes, to me they're more like the Barden practitioners. They're the
hmm,
greater path.
yeah, yeah,
They have a more fundamental understanding. And that's my. I mean, that I'd probably upset people if that's the kind of thing I wouldn't say in a room full of Golden Dawn enthusiasts. But
no, no,
but it's
no
what I
tools
happen to
required.
think about it. Obviously, other people are entitled to a different position, but it really struck me when I got back into Barden how Pug, the the hero, he develops the greater
Yeah,
path, and he had different. He didn't the lesser path didn't sit well with him. And if you think about all the regalia and all the stuff you've got to get
yeah,
for you know some types of magic. If you have their belt and your hat and your rod and you got
yeah,
your gear and you got to make it at a certain time in a certain way. And that's very much like the original it was Kree, wasn't it? The Kingdom of Kree. Um,
yeah,
and so the magician Colgan would do all that, and he could tell that Pug had the ability, but it just wasn't rolling for him. And then it's only when he got captured and got kidnapped to the other planet, and he encountered this other hermetics, that he
yeah.
had that things really took off for him. And so I think there's also it's not just yes you can say greater and lesser, but also there's an element of temperament as well, and I think that's true. Even though
Mm.
this is a fictional work, I think that there are parallels in actual hermetics as well. There is a question of temperament and stuff like that, as well as which one addresses the hermetic truths more properly. You
Yeah,
know.
that's great. What you mentioned there is, I recall. I think it's about the third chapter in, somewhere like that. I took a photo of it, and Pug talks about recalling the cantrips that he was
Mm,
taught, and they're basically the first three exercises in the mental training and initiation into hermetics.
yes,
And of course, then once he goes to the what's the name of the planet? I can't remember.
Pelawan.
Calaman, that's the one.
I've got the book
And
over there. I've read it several times since I
yeah,
bought it.
it's such an incredible experience. Like, it's almost like, some things just came out like the stars were lined up perfectly, and that book is just so good and captivating story, just well written. But when he goes to Calawan, he starts learning how to work with the elements and things like that. And
And to still the mind, otherwise he gets killed at
yes,
the doorway. He
yes,
cannot
that's
keep the
right.
mind still. He can't go through the doorway.
So there is a lot of, like, if you're reading, if you've just started, initiation to hermetics, or if you're an old time reader and practicer, you probably want to. I recommend it. Like, you want to check out Magician on the
It's a
side,
fun
because
read, yeah.
you're
It's
you're
good.
you're. And I think that's I often wonder about the purpose of Frabato, and why that was written, in a sense, as a sort of as an entry point to sort of stimulate a bit of interest,
Mm,
potentially, in the
mm,
pathway, and especially because it's presented in a type of real world applications of the skills, in a sense. There's obviously a lot of debate over the actuality of the autobiographical historicity and whatnot, but regardless of that, don't take away from the fact that it is intended to be somewhat fictional. There's a level of mystery and intrigue in there, and you
I
know,
think the ending's different in the German version as well. They made the English version nicer.
oh
Um,
really?
yeah, yeah. Apparently in the I don't speak German, so I've got the second hand. But apparently in the German version, Barden doesn't get told off for dealing with the Black Lodge. He kind of does his best to ignore them, but they keep bothering him. So then he basically does them over, and that's that. You know, he's not in trouble for it at all.
Isn't
In
that
fact,
interesting?
he shows remarkable restraint for a period of time before he finally lets them have it.
Yeah, he plays it pretty cool in the book, actually, doesn't he? You know, like he's a
Mm,
bit of a. He seems like a pretty level, balanced operator, and I think, you know, when you read that book and you kind of read between the lines of his temperament, like you say, because there's a lot of temperament development, refining and power development go hand in hand, right?
mm.
And yeah, and I think that when you're reading sort of engaging in stories that that support that, it almost gives you a type of archetype or a functional archetype to work with, even if it's set in a medieval background or something like that. There were still people in the village that were the cunning men and women and the this type of thing, or they were just operating a bit behind the scenes or underground. I mean, Barden was obviously coming across as a stage magician and performing and things like that. But I was just thinking about, man, I tell you what, back in the day, I had a ZX Spectrum computer. Now, for
Did you
those of
play
you in,
Elite Dangerous on it? Sorry, Elite. It would have been Elite, wouldn't it? Did you play Elite?
I played Elite on an old IBM AT, I think, or XT, I think it was, or I can't
Have you
remember what it
tried
was.
the new version?
Yeah, Elite Dangerous. Yeah, a friend of mine's got it, and my brother likes playing it. And I mean, I used to play it back in the day, but I don't know. It's a trading fighting game, and I know I like getting out, walking around, and exploring and things like that. But I
Yeah,
know that they've got a D.
I played it too. When my wife was ill, I one of my escapes was that game, and I took, let's just say I took it far too seriously. It is only a game. It is a wonderful game, but it was a very good way for me to just switch off from the to have my own time, and I perhaps put a little more of my, and that's one of the dangers with games is you can become very
Mm,
tribal and take them far too seriously,
mm,
and there is that as well. There's a, I don't know if you could say there's an egregore attached to them, but I think sometimes they develop almost an artificial elemental,
yeah.
and they do. And I would say for Elite Dangerous, that certainly happened for me because it gave me a way while I was looking after my wife and nursing her in her final months. It gave me a way to have my own place without being neglectful of my wife, because I knew that I could just literally log out and go and see her if she shouted and she needed anything.
Mm.
So it became more than it should be, and now it's gone back to being just a fun game. That's what it is now.
It's
Uh,
pretty cool, playing those old things and remembering them, because those old games had a magic about them that I mean, a lot of new developers are trying to make photorealistic or hyper realistic games, but they don't have a lot of them don't necessarily have the substance of the
that's
storytelling
right.
that the old ones have.
They
They
don't they
really,
don't have they don't have the depth. They have
yeah,
they have it's like a shiny pebble,
yeah.
whereas before it was perhaps a rough pebble but gold in the middle.
Perfect. Well done.
Yeah.
Um, I just wanted to say back to this Frabato that you
Yeah.
can
Sorry,
read
mate.
that
Yeah.
and then lead into. No, no, that's cool. Good. There was we had these so on this old ZX Spectrum you'd have a cassette deck, like an
Yeah.
old
Yeah.
cassette, right? And it'd take you 5 or 10 minutes sometimes to load this game up. It was probably a couple 2 to 5 minutes, whatever it was. But what you'd do is that the game would come with a book, and it was a novel. And what you'd do is that you'd read the novel, and then you'd read the story, and it would it'd draw you in and
Oh
immerse
yeah.
you,
Yeah.
and then it'd be like, oh, and then it's like, okay, now it's time to play the game, because there's an action sequence in the book that you play as part of the story unfolding. So then you load up the game, and then it doesn't work, and then you've got to load it up again, and then it does work, and then it's this really basic kind of thing. But it didn't really matter
And then the
because,
cat chews the tape.
oh, don't even start with that. And then you're winding it up with a pencil and hopefully it works. But here's the thing: is that the book, the story pulled you in and stimulated your
Well, yeah.
imagination. So by the time you got to this really rudimentary looking, and it was pretty rudimentary, 2 dimensional, maybe 3 colors at 4 colors at max, whatever. You would basically you'd already have your imagination stimulated to the point where it almost overlaid, not consciously, but sort of subconsciously, you're playing out this thing on the screen. And it was a wonderful kind of fusion of sort of the written word and the virtual world. And I almost kind of see a parallel with that, with the Barden work, in a sense. If you take a kind of a fun approach to it and go, well, the book can kind of get you. I mean, I know the book is written, like the series of books are, they were written in a different time for a slightly different audience and in a different, way of thinking, and texts were available, and just the general attitude to life would have been quite different for a whole bunch of reasons. But the thing is that you read Vibrato and you go, wow, it's like, because he gives ideas of how you can use the skills in life. But when you sort of see it packaged up in a type of an archetypal story outplaying in a relatable scenario with risk and consequences and adversary and capable adversary, like, and he gets, he gets burnt, as well in that. And so you see that I just think there's a value in it, and I've really found that in exploring the things like the tarot. And I've got a guy that I've interviewed a couple of times. He's a mate. He's written a whole stack of books, and one of them is, he hasn't released it yet. It's called the ritual, the magical and ritual use of metaphor, which is basically his book on tarot, on the 22 major arcana. And he's basically right. He says there's only 22 stories in the big city. And what he does is that he looks at each one of those as being, like it can play this way or it can play that way, and this type of thing. But what it does is it adds kind of relatable mythos and story to it. And you see, because you can line up Greek mythology next to tarot, you can arrange that to make that work a bit as well. But basically, you've got a picture with a whole bunch of symbols in it, and you can enter into that, and
Yes.
you can essentially absorb information that can help
What
to
you can do is
inform.
you can, with the keys, there was a big fuss just after the First World War because it was believed that these secret keys the Golden Dawn had were the keys, and they were the best ones. And with respect to the tarot, you can use these symbols and call signs to control the journey within the trump. So if you I did this some while ago. If you go in, if you project through the image of the trump, usually starting at a Kabbalistic temple and mapping it onto the tree of life,
Hmm.
there were two ways to do this. One is this kind of scripted path working where you play well, it would have been a tape or an MP3 file. You just visualize what's happening, but that's just a scripted thing. But the real process is where you go through the tarot doorway, and if you start to drift in your consciousness, you just simply employ one of these call signs. So, for example, the first tarot trump most people do, which may, if you wish, be mapped from Malkuth to Yesod on the Tree of Life.
This
It
fella
has the
here.
Hebrew letter Tor. That's the one, the Thoth deck. That's exactly the deck I used, mate. And it's
Yeah,
got
mate.
one of the reasons is because I really like the artwork, and the other is it had the symbols on the bottom, just like it
That,
shows there.
this is a beautiful. This has got some incredible artwork in it. This one. Hang on,
So
I'll see if
you
I can
you
bring it
go
there.
through that because so you've learned to visualize it, hence the need for the Barden training.
Yeah, yeah.
And if things start to go awry, you visualize the Hebrew letter Tor. It relates to Saturn. You do an invoking hexagram of Saturn. The title of that particular card is the Great One of the Night of Time, and the environment will stabilize for you, and then
Hmm.
you can continue on your journey. So you don't actually know what's going to happen when you go into the card. You've got a rough idea because of what the card's generally about, but you don't really know what you're going to see or feel. And if you become troubled, you use the call signs, and it'll focus the environment back to the central theme. And in this way, you can work your way through, as it were. You've got an idea. For example, if you map it onto the Tree of Life, you go from Malkuth to Yesod. You might have worked out you might have learned how to visualize so that you can form on, I suppose you call the astral, the Kabbalistic temples, they're already there through use by other people anyway.
Mm.
So you know, the journey itself in the card will vary depending on how much of that kind of principle of life you've already addressed. And at some point you'll know that you've reached the next, if you like, temple, because you see the temple of Yesod. But
Mm.
until you see it, you use these, as I say, these call signs to maintain focus with the
Mm.
trump. And I found, and a lot of other people have found, that when you return, let's say you do it on the Tree of Life, you come back to Malkuth, you look at the doorway, which is the tarot trump in the temple, so you're still out of your body, and it will gesture to you and tell you if you need to go into it again or if you haven't. The
Mm.
figures in each trump will interact with you before you enter them, and you know they'll beckon, or you know, job done. And so it could take one, it could take 10 journeys before that particular trump is assimilated to well, not nothing's ever totally assimilated, but until it's properly, you know, integrated into your psyche. And the big fuss about the call signs was because these particular, the Golden Dawn and others believed that these call signs were the ones that worked and all the others didn't.
Mm.
So when Crowley, Thofdeck, and then later also Regardie published the call signs, the furore. That was why they were in so much trouble. I think Regardie wrote that he had so many letters of evil, of malefic currents and evil intent sent to him, denoting that he was being ritually and magically attacked, that he could have turned it into wallpaper on his house. He had so many of these cursing missives. He could have literally wallpapered his house with them. He had, you know, that was how much. So that the Golden Dawn of that time believed these were the keys, if you like, Kabbalistic keys, effectively. This, of course, was before Bardon wrote Key to the True Kabbalah. And I would say that whether or not they're the keys, they are keys, because what happens is if when you're in the trumps as an initiate, you know, you just started doing magic and stuff. If it all gets too much for you, you can do these call signs, and it calms it all down. In other words,
Mm.
the environment of the trump will attenuate or calm down if it's getting too much for you at that time. You can't cope at that time. It'll calm down and let you know. Then you can come back on another occasion and do the same thing. And that's incredibly useful because first of all, it helps you to target what you're doing on the inner, and in the second instance, if it's too much for you, it'll ease off. It's angelic.
Mm.
They'll just pull back the energy, and they won't let you come back another day and try some more. And that's I mean it's a very nice way of doing some relatively early inner exploration for that reason. You know, that
Mm.
as long as you use the keys as I would say Crowley gives them on the trump, you don't have to use his deck if you don't like, but as long as you use those keys when you go into the trump, when you project out of your body and you go into the trump and through the doorway, any trouble you've got the well, in the world card it's the invoking hexagram of Saturn, the great one of the night of time, the Hebrew letter Tor. If you have a favorite deity pantheon that you can look in the books of attributions, like for example Liber 777, and you can ask that deity for assistance because that deity has definitely been ascribed to that particular path by
Mm.
previous magicians, and it helps you to have that integrative experience. So it's, I mean, if you look at was it Zelazny, and he wrote about the tarot cards and everything. It was more of a science fantasy story. We were talking about, you know, and you they call it hell riding. You drive riding desperately through the tarot card before things get you, and it's kind of a perhaps a more dramatic experience, but which perhaps if you didn't use the call signs, you might experience. But those call signs are out there. They're even printed on some card sets for you, and they
Mm.
definitely moderate the experience. If perhaps you shouldn't have done that day and you had worked too hard, or you'd had some kind of upset and you weren't in the right frame of mind anyway,
Mm.
you know, they really help. Um,
Yeah.
and I can see why different orders wanted to keep them secret for that reason, because they do. And it's not to say they're their only call signs, but those particular ones do genuinely work and they do genuinely help. And it's immense fun as well. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
it's nothing like Zelazny's books, The Hand of Oberon and all that. It's not. It's nothing like that. It's much nicer, much more prosaic, developmental, spiritually unfolding. It's not.
Yeah, yeah,
No
I
hell riding, I'm afraid. Sorry.
no. I recall early experiences with pathworking
Mm,
through various texts that I found. There's a book that I found, and it was I only managed to get a snippet of it though, but it was basically a full book of guided meditations through the various paths. And so you
mm,
start here, and when you're on when you're traveling through the world card, there's the goddess dancing in the middle, and all these interesting creatures dancing around, and you're leaving one temple and going through this strange town square almost, and then and it was so wonderfully written, and I really
yeah.
appreciate authors who are able to bring story in a sense, and a bit of flowery, not flowery, just storytelling, I think, into the way that they present the teachings,
It
because it's so much more engaging.
it is
You
it is
want to be
cool.
there more.
I do object to it though, because I think that if it's scripted, it's not your experience. Do you see what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
hear you. I hear you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whereas if the images rise up spontaneously, which
Yes.
is what I'm saying is, and this is this. So yes, if you see, when I first did this at the very beginning, I did a scripted one,
Yeah.
and then I went through it, and all the figures suddenly became two-dimensional cardboard, almost.
How interesting.
And I thought, well, this is telling me that this isn't really that developmental. So I tried this other approach, because I'd read all about the controversy and I understood that these keys. And when I found it worked, I'd go through the doorway. It wouldn't be scripted. I'd wait to see what just was there, and then
Yeah.
I'd use the call signs to activate it. And if things got too much, I'd use the call signs to control it. And all
Mm.
these things worked. And I still felt, that's my dog. Zool, you've been out. Go on, go over there. Sorry. Sit
Hello,
down. Come on,
puppy.
sit on the sofa. Sit on the sofa. Come on. She's going on the sofa. She's all right.
Beautiful.
So, because it's spontaneous, it's your direct and in other words, you have your relationship with the Trump, because the Trumps could be regarded as an individual entity. There's no doubt
Mm.
about that. So you develop a personal relationship with the Trump, the tarot Trump,
Mm.
rather than getting to know someone else's
Well,
experience with the Trump.
it potentially contaminates your experience, and it kind of
That's my view.
robs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I tell you what, this journey for me is similar to my musical journey, where I started off playing other people's music, and it gave me an understanding of the origins and how the evolution of, you know I started with rock music and went backwards, and then got right back to those slaves down on the plantation who picked up a guitar, and then were like, they were bending that flat seven and making it sound, oh man, they're delivering, they're expressing some pain, but in a beautiful special way here. And then
Mm.
the evolution of that forward, and where we get sort of modern rock, hip hop, and things like that. But with it's interesting, because there's all of these pre-created experiences, I could say, or fabricated kind of experiences that you can explore, like guided meditations and these types of things, but they are very much going to set a set of parameters of the experience, and it's putting things in their place, saying you got this and this. And I think this comes nicely back to Barden work as well, where he's not, especially in the first book, he's just saying, this is how you develop the faculties, and then whatever arises is essentially, this is your own. This is not something that we're putting on you. And there are, as far as things like Liber 777 go, these attributions and associations tend to have I'd love to get your thoughts on this. What do you think about the universal nature of correspondences?
Yes, but the detail will vary. That there are fundamental truths, and then there are cultural paradigms derived from those truths, which is
Mm,
why some people find different deities to others more appealing. You know, obviously the GD guys were well into the Egyptian, the Ennead, the main Egyptian deities, whereas other folks might get into Greek or Finnish or the the Slavic deities, the Indo-European deities, and each set of deities has slight variance. So in other words, stuff like Liber 777 is a rough guide. It deals with the basic principles, and sometimes there is overlap. People can get too hung up on the attributions and not and for example, very simple stuff like Poseidon. Well, Poseidon in the Greek pantheon is the god of the sea, but he was originally of chaos before there was anything about the sea.
mm,
He was about the chaos, the primordial chaos. So you have to be very careful and not take the attributions too literally. So that's a good example of where you might ascribe Poseidon to one particular attribution from Liber 777, but then there are other aspects of the deity that have nothing to do with that.
yeah.
And you might if you were to use contact with that deity for guidance in a particular thing, and then all of a sudden something else crops up that's not inside your set of tram lines that you'd established. It's because your tram lines are tram lines, and that there is actually a road and a train on either side, and then you haven't been looking at that. So
Mm,
it's a guide rather than carved in stone,
mm,
you know, and that's what I mean about developing a personal relationship about things,
mm. I
and
yeah.
also and I think this is where it really bites. A lot of these things start. I was talking about this with you before, and this is, forgive me if I'm talking a lot, but this is important.
That's so good. Go for it.
A lot of work starts in the microcosm, as above, so below. So for example, we've been talking about the tarot trumps. They're generally ascribed to the microcosm with the sephira, if they're plotted onto the classic Kirscher tree, as the macrocosm. So your paths between the sephira are the microcosm, and then you experience the interplay between the two sephira that way, which is the macrocosm. The two sephira which the tarot trump is ascribed to on the tree. So what can happen is that the microcosm suddenly becomes the macrocosm without you realizing it, and this can be alarming. To give an example, a long time ago, I was very, very, very close to the Egyptian deity Horus, and I still have a great deal of fond regard, respect, and reverence for that deity now, even though I don't really do the same kind of work with him. And I received from this deity a mantra, um, and it was basically three names of the deity. And I was doing a mantra session with people, and the idea was that we burnt a particular incense. We all sat down and we literally chanted this mantra. Well, at least two people got very upset. But one person said it was the same thing but didn't want to go into it. The other person told me that they had a spontaneous, unexpected, and very alarming out of body experience, and they felt they couldn't get back into their body even though they wanted to because of the mantra. So everyone was sitting down doing this Horus mantra, and part of it was, Horus. The idea is that it's the hawk, the hawk deity. So they were all of a sudden out of their body as if they were a hawk, and they couldn't get back in their body because the mantra was kind of in the way, and they got very upset. So that's an example of where microcosm suddenly becomes, if you're just chanting a mantra, that's kind of an internal thing. Not it tends to be somewhat, mantra is effective, but it's somewhat in the microcosm. But all of a sudden, I suppose you could say this somehow suddenly became tantra for them, and all of a sudden they were out of their body, and because they weren't aware of the mechanism, and that it seemed to them that it was involuntary. They got very upset about it and were very relieved when everyone stopped and the mantra stopped, so that they could get back into their body again. I mean, the mantra was very protective. It was all the three names of Horus were all protective names. Horus is a very, very protective deity. So they weren't. It would have been very unlikely that anything untoward would have happened to them. It was more the surprise, unexpected, and involuntary. To them, it seemed like it was an involuntary experience that they had not bargained for, and that lack of control was. And I think when you talk about the attributions, a lot of modern magic starts in the microcosm. Barden's an exception to that in many ways if you look at his training. But because it starts in the microcosm and then all of a sudden you can suddenly have the macrocosm kicking in, that's the bit where you're not in the tram lines anymore, and everything gets a bit hairy sometimes for people. And I would say that's certainly something that happened to me on occasion as well. Although after I've got over the initial shock, it usually provided me with considerable appreciation. But other people might not take it the same way, and they might, in essence, even stuff like mantra works. That's why I don't really like these taped path workings, because there's no room for growth in them. Everything's according to the tape. I mean, I suppose if they left it unopen, I don't know. I haven't listened to it all. Maybe if they leave it open-ended at some point, but the problem there is that you don't really understand what's going on because you've been relying on all this stuff you've been listening to, and all of a sudden the macrocosm kicks in, and you're filling your pants because this wasn't part of the tape. What's going on here? Whereas I would argue with the call signs, for example, looking at the tarot, yes, things are spontaneous. They are things you didn't expect, but that the angelic forces will help you because you've got the call signs, and they'll help you. If you start getting stressed out or upset, you can do the call signs and calm it all down. Go home, as it were, back to your physical body, have a cup of tea, mull it over, and try again another day if you want. And that's why I consider that to be far superior, and like, well, anyway, but I'm digressing a bit. The microcosm is great, and then all of a sudden the macrocosm kicks in, that can cause people a bit of a shock,
Mm.
unless they
It's
account for it in the first place.
it's almost like, you're getting to know a particular little area, and you're exploring the length, girth, and width of it. That's probably quite relatable, and then you get sort of thrust into this new experience that is, maybe can be a bit destabilizing, because it's, just to bring it back to a game reference, it's like you're playing a game on rails. It seems there's you can wander down this one and wander down that corridor, but generally speaking, it's on rails, and it's a, familiar experience. And then, you play one of these open world games, and it can almost be just overwhelming, because there's just so much information and data and pathways to explore. And but you're right, and I think, one of the reasons I like the Feist book, Magician, is because before Pugster goes and does his serious training in Calawan, he's a slave, and he has to go and do it, and basically go into the muck and
Yeah.
build himself and build up the chassis, so to speak, and also learn, pretty hardcore humility. It's almost like a Japanese medieval
Oh
Japanese
yeah, yeah,
society type thing, isn't it?
yeah. They used
You
it.
know,
I think that Feist did use the Japanese model for Kelowan, yeah, and
yeah,
the
because
European medieval model for the other planet, Midchem.
yeah, yeah,
Mid
Midkemia,
Midchem, yeah, that's it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and so, but that's it, and but like you said, I think as an entry point, meditating on a tarot card and just climbing into a card and having a look around is, and, observing the symbolism. I think, from memory, because it's been a while since I sort of went through that. It was a few years back when I was really getting into especially GD stuff.
Mm.
Was the it just sort of popped up, and I have this real weird affinity with the tarot, and sometimes it drives me nuts, because it's like going, well, yeah, I won't go into it, but the two card, like, if you take two cards, if you take the world card from the Rider Waite deck, and the world card from the Thoth deck,
The
and you
universe, yeah,
yeah, the universe, sorry, yep, and there are the flavor of the experience is different, although
yeah.
it does share symbolism, and I think that sort of speaks to this kind of like, there's whose deck was it? It was like a Manly P Hall, or someone brought out a deck, and it was just so bare bones, like the symbolism was just like pictograms, or line diagrams or something like that, but the initial sort of what initiated the experience was so bare bones. It didn't like give a lot of guided symbolism. It just kind of like, you know it's got a couple of basic attributions, but rather than fill it out with a provided experience, you might say, it sort of leaves things open a bit. And I think that's probably why I just feel such a kinship with this Barden work, is it's more about developing your perceptual doorways so that you can have a highly personalized experience. And I'm not, I've got to say, like, one thing I will mention this, and I know that it's getting late for you too, bro, if you need to rock and roll shortly. So,
I've got about half an hour left in me. After that, my eyes will need matchsticks.
oh, that's perfect. Thank you. This is great. This is a really fun conversation, because we're finding this sort of cross relationship between, adventuring, through pop culture, game media, and also, finding those common denominators. Because I mean, pretty much everyone nowadays has got some exposure to pop culture, movie, game things, and in this community, well, obviously, maybe not, or maybe, but. Where was I going with this? So, oh yeah, so the provided experience versus the bare bones, sort of like start here, and then the thing just naturally flowers in and of itself. And I've got to say, though, it's like this. Sometimes I do enjoy exploring the worlds provided by others. And I came across this nice fusion, right? So I've got this book. It's called, ESP Induction Through Forms of Self Hypnosis. It's written by a guy who's got a few doctorates as a physicist and an anesthesiologist, and he's also a magician. And of course, because he couldn't find the answers in science he was looking for, so he turned to magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, but what in one of these guided meditations, you basically there's these scripts in there, and one of them's you're basically floating on a river in the dark, but you're getting used to the feeling of basically, and what ends up happening is that you learn to exit your body through your feet. Because you're on a boat and you're learning to feel like, your astral body floating essentially, and you learn how to float out of your body through your feet. It's a really cool experience. But there's all of these other things loaded in too, but it's not so much visual, it's in a dark setting. But what was really cool about this particular script is that you record it in your voice for yourself, and you're talking to yourself. So it's your own guided meditation, and that gives it a sort of a I guess it's a personal authority. Now, you obviously want to make sure that if you're going to do this, you trust the script and all that, because like there's a sort of it's almost like rocking your beads, or doing mantra or affirmation. In a sense, you're using your own the sound of your own voice, but you're feeding it back in, and you're just listening to yourself talk and guide you through this meditation. And I found that to be very good for it was more potent, I think, than listening to someone else's voice,
Yeah.
especially if back in my younger days when I met, because we in New Zealand, you met the odd person from overseas, but unless you're living in a metro, you're generally just speaking to most people who've got the same accent as you, or a variation of it, right, of the dialect. But when you start, like, as soon as I met a person with an American accent, all I could think of was stuff that I'd seen on TV. And so I had an instant bias towards, like, oh my gosh, this person sounds like an infomercial, because we had a pretty gated experience of culture. Our experience of culture generally happened. We had our first television station, which was all Brit comedy and drama and news, and then we had our other television station. Literally, we had two television stations, and that was more of the sort of the American type thing. And so that was our frame of reference, prior to internet, prior to all these things. And so, but when you're listening to this guided meditation, I have to say, I found this lady, and I think she was Romanian, and she had this beautiful voice with this accent, and it just kind of pulled you into the experience. And it's really interesting. Like, I can't say I've had that same experience, because I don't really listen to guided meditations, but I did do a bit of exploration. I couldn't really find guys that did it, but when it was a girl's voice, it was like, oh, there's something magic about that. It was very magnetic, I guess is probably the right term. But yeah, but anyway, recording your own scripts, I found that to be quite an interesting sort of approach to it, because you could relax, but you trusted. There was a level of trust that you had with what was playing out in your ears.
Can I ask you a slightly edgy question?
Oh, go on then.
Where's the growth? Where's the opportunity for growth in that?
Okay. So the script, right, was
Yeah.
obviously about entraining a skill set at one level.
Right.
And then towards at the end of it, it was tailored to basically it said, now I want you to think about, what areas of life you would like to improve. And then
Oh,
I
I
would
get
like
you.
you. Yeah, and then I would like, because it pulls you into a receptive state, because it brings you into awareness of your astral body, so you can load it towards the end, and you give yourself orders. You don't make gentle suggestions. It says you give yourself orders, and I can't
So what happens if the order is seemed like a good idea at the time, but you realise was ill-advised?
well, what I ended up, this is a great question, because what I thought is that before I go into one of these operations, knowing what's coming, I want to have those set up, because I'm lulling myself into a receptive state. And that may not be the best time to come up with stuff. And so you've got to go in there with a solid plan. So any of this self-hypnosis stuff, you write out an agreement with yourself. This is what's
Gotcha.
going to happen. And so there were several other exercises there, and the guy's the same. He's because he's a trained Jungian psychotherapist too, and he's saying, look, before you go into this with yourself, you make a written agreement and you read it, and like you're a lawyer, and because one thing I found in it.
How do you
Oh, sorry.
know that one part of you won't want to suddenly renege on the agreement? And furthermore, how do you know
Hmm.
if that is simply a crisis of growth or just it was ill-conceived.
Do you mean during the experience something else pops
Let's
up?
say you have an agreement with yourself.
Yes.
Now that you might experience resistance, which is why you're doing this, to get past whatever the resistance is.
Yes.
And that's obviously a positive thing. But how do you know that the resistance is for a good reason, or simply that it's resistance to growth? How do you
Mm.
know? What I'm really trying to say is, where's the discrimination? Because you'll note that I do not doubt this works. That's let's just to be clear,
Mm.
I do not doubt this works. What I'm saying is, how do you know that the agreement that you've entered into is actually a really pants idea, or that it's actually a good idea, even if there's resistance, and that you need to get past the resistance and you're using this technique? How can you, as it were, use the virtue of Malkuth, discrimination,
Mm-hmm.
to what informs you to the appropriate course?
Right. So there is a preface where you read through. The book is obviously written in a sequential sort of format,
Yeah, yeah.
and it gives you insight into the rules of things like auto-suggestion, into the nature of what you're essentially tampering with here, because
Mm.
you are essentially reprogramming yourself. I mean, we're doing this somewhat with the Barden work, although it's slightly different because you are when you do your soul mirrors, you write them out, and you have very cleanly separated categories of I want this, I don't want that sort of thing, or this is something, whatever. Now it could be somewhat akin to that, and saying, well, maybe that's part of your path as well. So why are you trying to get rid of that thing? Because that might be something that invokes opportunities for you that you need to work through. So, but without sort of splitting hairs on that, as far as this particular book goes. The idea is that this is about awakening perceptual capacities,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's the prime goal of it. But it's also like uh, I generally, when I came across it, because I was doing it I was doing it for skill development, not for personal development so much,
That's
or
that. Yeah, yeah.
so, when it came to personal development, that's when that sort of came up more and more as I was doing mindfulness meditation, when I was starting to just see, like, I had a thought and I'm like going, that's a shitty thought. Where did that come from? What's that about? And, just having an interest in why these thoughts were popping up. And then I sort of like catered things around that a little bit, but I appreciate what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's, you see, what I suppose I'm arguing, um, is firstly, I'm not denying the effectiveness of some of these methods, even ones I haven't tried.
Mm,
I think that, generally speaking, they can be effective. But I would argue that you have to stick to the fundamental hermetic principles to avoid unnecessary chaos, if you like.
mm,
It might be that you want to do, that another example would be results magic. If you take it a step further, where you do results magic, and then when you get your result, you wish you hadn't done it.
that's a
You
fair
know,
point.
yeah. So it's not. I'm not saying it's purely. In this case, you enter into a contract with your own psyche, and then you realize it was a really bad idea, but now you've agreed to it, and that can cause, perhaps, um, a degree of wasted time at the very least.
Mm,
you know so therefore the fundamental hermetic principles of purifying yourself and balancing yourself, um, are they that is why, Malkuth has the four sectors, the four elements, and why the virtue of Malkuth is, discrimination between that which is relevant right now and that which is not. It's I mean, you can see it in Barden's stuff. The soul mirror is just discrimination. It's the virtue of Malkuth. It's really solid. It's really,
mm.
and it's so thorough. what he says. It's, compared to I'm reading stuff into it. I mean, Barden doesn't say anything about Malkuth and discrimination in step one of initiation into medics, but it seems to me that that's really what you're looking at there, and it's wonderful, whereas I find personally that a lot of these, I suppose, what you call life hacks, I think the problem is that they work. If there isn't always, there isn't always a problem. I don't want to sound harsh, but when there is a problem, it's because they work. If you see what I mean.
There are certainly unhelpful shortcuts. What do they
Yeah,
say?
yeah.
There's shortcuts through the woods to grandma's house, but there's big bad wolves. And you have to be
Absolutely.
mindful of that. And so, it helps to have some context into what you're doing and what the potentials are. And, like in the early stages, I was having some, I was getting thrust into some pretty wild experiences that I had like no footing in to handle. But I built some muscles as a result of that, and some. Well, I don't want to call them coping mechanisms, but there's like when I was working in the construction and forestry industry and dealing with these salty contractors and large business owners. um, I didn't know they were being mean to me. They weren't being mean to me, but I just took it that way. I had to develop the thick skin, but the only way I developed the thick skin was doing it. But, as far as unnecessarily disadvantaging yourself or causing yourself a long-term mischief, this is it, right? And I think, too, it depends a lot on your temperament. And this is why I keep coming back to initiation into Hermetics, because it's a framework with an ethical kind of thing of like, well, let's break down some of your proclivities and prejudices potentially, and let's just get to know that, because that stuff is gonna be unhelpful in some ways. Because if you get those things jacked up on steroids without sorting them out first, they're going to play out. And I say this to people. I say, look, the number one thing is that if you got some funky personality traits that you're still working on, if you start putting putting a rocket engine on that stuff, you're going to hurt the people around you, and potentially, and it's better to sort these things out. I kind of liken it to the empowerment side of it as like a rocket pack you strap on your back. But if you don't have a good navigation system, you're just going to go all over the place and banging into crap. And another bro talks about dragging yourself down the hallway and bouncing off the walls because you're all erratic and gathering karma and getting bruised and all that. Whereas you're able, with the refinement techniques, you're able to essentially float and cruise down a little bit. You can even take your hands off the oars a little bit of the boat. You will get pulled down a bit. And I found some of these kinds of analogies and metaphors to be useful at different things. You can only take them so far, though. But
There are universal. I mean, we've been talking about the tarot as doorways. I mean, there's a school of the trumps, the traditional trumps. They're sometimes referred to as the tunnels of Horus. But there are also the averse tarot, the cliphotic or unbalanced tarot.
yeah.
They're referred to as the tunnels of Set, and the one of the reasons I think why the keys as was such a big deal is because it is perfectly possible for people to use the symbol sets for the cliphotic tarots and activate them instead. So in other words, you've got someone who, let's hypothesize. A person's done the guided path workings. They bought some fairly low grade ones, were underwhelmed, but they seem to develop a functionality, and they're able to enter into a symbol and explore it. And then they decide to experiment with these cliphotic symbol sets, and they enter into the cliphotic paths on the cliphotic tree. I mean, I've met people who've done that, but usually it's not something I've done. But usually they're a long way along in magic. They've it's several years down track, and they develop a sort of interest in this kind of thing, and they go off and do it. And they don't seem especially worst for wear. But I suppose what I'm saying is that if we move away from the microcosm, if you say that these symbol sets can activate and draw you in, even if you're a novice, then it really does become very important what symbol sets you use. And some people perhaps don't develop the virtue of discrimination, and perhaps they. I mean, it's difficult to say because I've come across people where they've had a bad experience with magic and occultism in general. But the thing is, they were nutters first. They were already nutters before they, it was merely a further expansion of what they'd already been doing for years, be it drug abuse or I don't even want to go into it. But they were pretty chaotic, impulsive people, and often lacked much of a moral outlook on how not to hurt other people or how to look after yourself, and things like that. And then of course they do these things and they become the same kind of person writ much larger, and also there's a degree of destruction that they experience as well. You can see late teens, then you see late 20s, and they're finished. They're broken. But you can't. You can say that kind of work did that to them, but you have to also say if they hadn't done that kind of work, would they have ended up where they are anyway? And the answer is probably yes. They would have probably found some other way to destroy themselves. But at the same time, these symbol sets are macrocosmic, and that's the difference. And that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
These symbol sets are macrocosmic. They do impact you, and although, for example, mantra is microcosmic, it can suddenly trigger the macrocosm, which is what some mantras are designed to do. So the mantra I was given by the deity was designed to do that, obviously.
Yeah, this is
it.
it.
At least they had a bit of a shock, but they got over it. It was no harm done.
So this is another thing. I mean, we were talking about the guided meditation process that I was talking about the before, and it's also like when you encounter information about a topic that you would like to explore further, a personal direct experience, say through magic and occultism, these types of things. When you receive information coming from what appears to be an external source, perhaps through deity, and that there has to be a level of trust developed before you just suddenly they might give you the keys to something as soon as you meet them, and it's like, well, is this car roadworthy that you're giving me the keys to? I need to get to know you first, bro, before I take this information on.
I think there are some entities that will give you a box of matches, and that there are other entities that will show you how to use the box of matches and warn you about what can happen if you're not careful. And then only then, when you clearly understand, do they give you the box of matches. And what you could call cliphotic or unbalanced entities are the here, matches. I don't care what happens. Type
Yeah.
entities. You know they.
Go
And
start
that
some chaos.
yeah, oh yeah. There's a very strong chaos. They are out. They're much more naturally chaotic, but then you could say this. This is what I was saying earlier. You could say the same about, for example, Poseidon in his ultimate primal aspect, and he's that's not cliphotic, but you know there's a side. I'm thinking about this because there was someone I used to know that did a lot of work with Poseidon. This sort of the primal sea of chaos thing. That's much later. It's not cliphotic, but it's still chaotic, and it was a big surprise to that person. You know, all of a sudden, they progressed past all this oceanic stuff, and all of a sudden they were in this much more profound, formless kind of state of understanding Poseidon, and that's you know it these things. I suppose what I'm saying is things like ritual magic, um, and I presume, although I have limited experience, Eastern meditation systems. They're systems for a reason. In that it enables you to package these events and to progress in a measured and steady way.
Mm.
Um, when you strip away the systems, because a lot of the time there's a lot of excess padding that can build up in them, and I'm thinking perhaps a little bit of some of the Golden Dawn stuff, for example. You know, there's so much padding. Then they wonder where are the contents if you pull away all the where's you know
Yeah.
there's all
Where's
this
the
padding and
meat?
I can't actually see what it was packaging. I don't see, you know, and that can be a problem. But then
Mm.
you can get the other extreme, and if you don't have a system to especially when you start out, if you don't have a system to help you orientate yourself, then you're reliant on one of two things. You're reliant on other people or luck. And I don't know which is worse because some of the people I've encountered, you know, they haven't been particularly, you know, they may have seemed like they wanted to help people, but perhaps they were only interested in helping themselves. You know, I'm not,
So, yeah.
there's a bit. I'm sorry if it sounds so negative. I don't mean to be.
That's all good. You're just speaking your mind, and it's 1:30 in the morning. I mean, we're 12 hours apart here, so well done. You know, you could put a piece of bread on the ground, and I could put a piece of bread on the ground, and we could make an earth sandwich pretty much. You're almost the antipode, and time-wise too.
Yes, that's
But
true.
but I just want to say, you know, there was a great quote in that ESP induction book, which is like, before I can take you to Mars, we have to learn how to leave Earth and get to the moon first. And, you
Yes,
know,
so there is a system there. That's good.
there's a development pathway that's amenable to high quality outcomes where you're not going to be flopping about all over the place and trial and error. And like I say, you know, I said this a few times on previous lives, is that, man, I'm so grateful for all those people that tried different foods and fruits and vegetables and herbs for the first time, because they were the pioneers of what humans could interact with in some ways before they maybe had interaction with certain deity and guiding spirits. So um, I think, you know, there's real validity to, especially once you've been on this track for a while and you've had some. I've had in the early stages, especially, I was offered a lot of glimpses. I would say, like a try before you buy. You know, every time I'd
Mm.
read a book on something, I would have an experience that day or the following day, and then it's like, here you go. And now what you need to do is to do the hard work. We've helped you, give you a sample taste, a glimpse. First time I read an out of body book, had an out of body experience the next day. Lucid dreaming book, had one the next day. First time I did tarot path working, very clean, clear experience, and after that I had to work at it. But that's the thing is that there's an assisted experience to say, hey, here's a potential, but you know, we're kind of giving you a foot up on the ladder here, or giving you a shoe up or whatever, a foot up to climb the wall. But you know, ideally, you need to develop these yourself. And so part of it is that you know, like, I don't know about you, man, but like every so often I'll have a really vivid dream where I get someone shows me a book that I've never heard of or something like that, or will say, like I've heard about it, and they'll be like, here you go, right, go read this. And that sets off a whole new exploration pathway. I don't even know how legitimate some of this stuff is, but it's always very interesting. So it's like, yeah, cool. Thanks for the reference and for the suggestion. But as far as like a guided, I think Barton talks about this. There is, and obviously they talk about HGA in that too. Is that I think we're allowed to fall down, and we're allowed, but there's no greater muscles than the ones you develop from picking yourself up as well. But we can learn from those who've come before us and not do ourselves an unnecessary mischief at the same time. And I think the challenge is navigating that, because when you step into these bigger shoes, there's less hand holding and less training wheels to an extent. And I'd love to get your commentary on this. I'm sure you've got something to share.
Well, I've been thinking about, because we were talking about, initially we were talking about video games and how you can escape into them.
Yep.
And then we talked about tarot trump. So then you mentioned this technique with your own psyche, which sounds analogous. And I think within the Western Hermetic tradition, this is a whole body of work. It's separate from, it can have impact on, for example, things like evocation or the creative word, but this whole going to other states of existence, which are both within you and in the macrocosm as well. They exist in both the microcosm and the macrocosm. You obviously have different. You obviously have different areas, and that I suppose that the most important area when you start out is the ones where you can have the most control, which is why, as I say, it was such a big deal when these keys were published in the 1920s and 1930s. That was the fact these keys were there available, and therefore anyone could use them to ameliorate or amplify was a huge deal. But if you look at something that I've been particularly interested in for decades, the Enochian aethers. If you do so, I've talked about, if you like, the balanced paths, the what some people call the tunnels of Horus. Then you've got the imbalanced ones, the so-called tunnels of Set. And I admit I have no practical experience of those. Then you've got, it almost seems like it's not a different set of regions, but the rules are different. And by that I mean, when you go to the aethers, the Enochian aethers, the 30 airs, the fundamental difference is that they don't attenuate if you use the call signs. So for example, if I were to explore the 32nd path on the Tree of Life using the Tarot Trump, the world or the universe, like I say, I can use the invoking hexagram of Saturn, the title of the trump, the Hebrew letter Tor, a particular deity, and I can I could, for example, if I cast my mind back to that kind of work, I could do some kind of devotional work with that deity specifically as a prelude to the trump, while I was learning to visualize the trump in full detail. And then I would do the out of body work, having done my preparation. And like I say, if I was upset about it, I could use these call signs, ask the deity for help, and without any exception, I would receive guidance, help, or a calming or an amplifying, depending on what I asked for. And at the same time, the experiences themselves were very spontaneous, and although they were in keeping with the theme of the card, they were not even faintly scripted. The experience was completely surprising in many, and it's only once the experience was occurring that you realised how germane it was to that particular principle, to that particular card. So there's a process of integration going on. If you compare that to the Enochian Aether, there's no attenuation, or
It's raw.
you can't ask for help. You shouldn't be there if you weren't up to it. You shouldn't have gone, and now you're there, and in some of them later on, much higher up, you can't get out if you get it wrong. You can't. I mean, like I said, it's theoretically possible to die, physically die, and yet we're talking about angels here. We're not talking about the tunnels of Set and Cliffotic Geni. We're talking about angels, literally God's angels. But there's no doubt. But it's both been written about and to some extent by some people experienced. So you can these supposedly angelic airs can. Well, it's theoretical that you could die. I've never heard of anyone die from entering an aether unprepared, but certainly people have ended up in the loony bin for a few months from it, and eventually got let out when they normalised and gave up magic entirely thereafter, and went off and did something else with their lives. So I suppose it is a big deal. This is why symbol systems and magic systems are a big deal if you're into them. Obviously, if you're more interested in football and snooker and drinking beer with your mates, that's perfectly good. That's your thing. I'm not saying, but if you're into it, the symbol systems are incredibly important, and whether or not they're correct is hugely. Certainly your sanity could depend on it. If and theoretically, at least, like I say, I've never heard of it happening, but theoretically, your life, it's when I came back to the UK in I think it was 2001. I'd been working in Madeira. It was only for about 6 or 9 months. It's a very nice island to work in. But I came back and I encountered some of my old friends I used to know around Cardiff, and they got to know a lot of people that had just come up to university and stuff. And they were, if ever I was asked, do you want to, what's it like doing this magical occult and stuff, because they were interested, I said, well, the problem with it is if that a certain point is reached where you can't stop anymore, even if you think the thing with, certainly with Western magic, I don't know what it's like in the East, but I've certainly observed with Western magic, it's a point is reached with it where it won't let go of you in that lifetime because you've done too much. Even I suppose you could retreat into fundamentalist religion of some kind and just be an absolute full-on,
And I know people who have.
There you go. So and I think it's unfair not to mention this, even though I can, people think I'm being a bit silly, or have certainly in the past. What an uncool thing to say to someone, But it's true. There's a point at which, if you do enough of this stuff, that's it now. You're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. You can't put it down and go off and do something. Like I at one point in my life I was a tour guide, and I was doing local history tours in Exeter
Hmm.
and Devon, and then I went to university a bit later, and then at another point in my life I was running a psychology department for a sixth form college.
Oh wow.
So that's two totally different things, really. And there's no, I might have, I don't know, I might. This guy I used to be friends with. He gave up. He was doing a computer science. He was really really good. He decided to become a hairdresser. He's a very good hairdresser, really good. But it's a completely different gig to being a top of the range computer guy. Completely
Man,
different deal. But with
yeah.
occultism and magic, you can't swap it out for something else after a certain point.
It's would you say that there's nothing else that scratches the itch quite like it? Would you say it's akin to that of some sort?
Yes, but sometimes you certainly not with me, but there are certainly people who wish they'd never done it, and now it won't let go of them.
Yeah, yeah. It's always knocking on the door. Sorry, if I just want to quickly just check this question
Mm.
here. Which keys are we talking about published in 1920 that you were mentioning? I think these are the
The,
ones that
the,
were published by. Yep.
they were the Hebrew letters, the elemental and planetary attributions and titles, in effect Liber 777.
Yeah.
But the specific, looking at it from a very narrow context, those symbol sets mapped onto the Kirscher tree of life
Yeah.
weren't known. And as I think Regardie wrote, they were only given as a kind of a personal, often in the cases of personal or social esteem. In other words, you had to grease up to someone before they give you them.
Yeah. Yeah. And this
And
was the
then,
date.
and then
Yeah.
you could use them to work these paths and get a solid output out of them compared to any other symbol system. As far as now, in the modern day, people question that, and that, whether or not it's true, that was the view. It could be that there are other symbol sets that have an equal. You get an activation of the path by using these symbols, whereas if
Mm.
you can ascribe any symbol you want potentially to any path, and that's why I'm talking about basic hermetic truths
Mm.
and how symbols tie into them, and how these have been and often in many cases still are secret. So you had a secret set of symbols that, for example, could be used to properly activate tarot trumps mapped onto the tree of life for the purposes of exploration in your subtle body of those subtle realms. And once you had these symbol sets, it would work for you very, very nicely. And without those symbol sets, it took a lot longer, and it was much more haphazard. And this is why the Golden Dawn were very upset with both Crowley and Regardie when these keys were published, and why Regardie could have sent the hate letters he received, could have used the hate letters he received as he writes or wrote. He could have used. There were so many. He could have used them as wallpaper in his house. There were so many letters from so many people that he'd revealed these holy secrets, if you like. Does that answer? Do you think that's likely to answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's yeah. It was just to point it out. Thank you. That was great. Yeah, I see this in the there's a couple of things you brought up there, and then bro, we better let you go so you can get a good night's sleep. You still got a bit of that DLC to sort out. Maybe for your maybe for Saturday night.
I'll take a shower tomorrow and have some breakfast and maybe do some more then.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to say that the revelations of symbols is a history of these things happening with certain systems where they are kept behind closed doors, and that was rightly so. In some ways too, because um, people can dirty up the egregore in some ways as well if they're not clean and this type of thing. I look at the
They
how.
can, but they usually end up, as I say, ending up with the negative cliphotic entities, and they just get eaten by them.
Yeah. So yeah. So
But
I mean, I'm just
the problem is that one always regrets, because there was always a good side to them,
yeah.
and you just that there's a point of decision where they decide to do this stuff, and after that's done, it's kind of game over. It's just a long process where they seem to almost be somehow eaten in some way.
Yeah.
But the other side of it, like I say, is with like I say, I don't know if it's the same with Eastern stuff, but with Western magic, if you do it enough, eventually it won't let it. It won't let you go. You're stuck with it for the rest of your life. So let's say it takes 3 or 5 years, depending on what you do, depending on if you just wear the clothes and learn the jargon, or if you actually do anything. Depends on whether this effect kicks in or not. But that there is a point of no return with it. And I know that sounds kind of a bit wacky, but I've observed this, and I've seen people that have given up on it, if you like, but it hasn't given up on them.
Mm.
And it's not something people really mention. But I this is what I think. I've seen it enough times. Once you've done enough of it, it's a switch is flipped, and that's it. The occult and you are together for the rest of your life, whether you like it or not. What form it takes, that's for you to decide. But it ain't going away, and people don't seem to understand that. And I know it sounds silly as I say it. I don't mean it to oh, be careful. Well, don't be careful or be careful is up to you. Just understand that it's not like when I was a tour guide, then I was a psychology teacher, that lecturer, then I
Mm.
was something else, and I could have my mate went and became a carpenter or did computer science, then he did hairdressing. It's not like that. There's a certain point with it where it won't let you off anymore. That's what you're going to do, and it's going to keep cycling back round and impinging on you if you don't do anything.
Mm.
It will literally bite you on the arse if you ignore it for too long.
Mm.
And I know that sounds dreadfully dramatic. I don't mean it to be, but it's certainly an observation.
Mm.
And I do think that's the truth. There's a point. It's different to any other undertaking. You could become a wonderful pianist, Bill, and then stop. You could just stop, couldn't you? You
Mm.
could just go off and I don't know, become a tree surgeon or something, couldn't you?
Well, you could, you can. There's a clean separation that you can make and go right. It's like me as a musician. I don't really play anymore. I stopped being a teacher and being a performer, and now I've found myself being interested in these topics, and nothing else scratches the itch. Like I said,
Yeah.
and I'm finding ways of because I just naturally found results through offering sort of energy healing. And now it's like, well, here's a really valuable use of this thing, and there's a set of parameters that I have to observe though as well. And I'm discovering as I go through it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a perfect fit for you. I suppose what can happen is if people don't really think it through and they activate stuff,
Yeah.
it doesn't deactivate. It's not, that's what I'm trying. It's hard to explain, but observationally, a certain point is reached with Western magic and occultism, where after that it's part of your life, and that's that's what it is. Whereas with other, if you put time and effort into other things, you can literally cast them aside, and they're, you know, with ritual magic, certainly that's not possible. So be clear about what you really want to be doing.
So
I mean,
what's it? What do you?
like you, I'm perfectly happy. There's nothing I can think of more than, I did a really nice ritual today, and I'm sure I'll come up with something useful, possibly another piece of ritual magic I'm going to do tomorrow. So I'm loving it. But if it went, if I suddenly went off the idea, that's not feasible. As I say, a certain point is reached where that's no longer feasible. It must find expression in some
Mm,
form. I
it's kind of
suppose.
it's part of your makeup in a sense, isn't it? You've sort of signed up, or it's become part of your expression. It's like like someone who likes doing something who doesn't get to do it. If they don't get to do it, that thing will find its way to express itself through other things, in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. Even if, but sometimes people don't want. I have encountered people who didn't want to do occultism anymore, and you could see how it was overshadowing their life.
Yeah,
You could
I,
see how it was like some kind of um, thing skulking along behind them. Whatever they were doing, it was kind of there, um, and they're kind of trying to ignore it and just be a mundane person, but they can't really ignore it.
I,
It's
I know a couple of people who ended up going hardcore Christian.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. That's the only
and that,
antidote.
yeah, and I think if you're aware of the New Age author and card creator Doreen Virtue,
Yeah, yeah.
she switched. She made a radical pivot a few years back, and now she's out. She's not even just like going, okay, I'm Christian, I'm fine with that. Now she's completely slagging off her legacy, and it's hardcore. But like, hey, I'm great that there's a catch-all there. I mean, that movie Mists of Avalon. Um, one of the priestesses finds solace in the church and that type of
Oh
thing. And
yeah,
so,
I read the Marion Zimmer Bradley. I read the book. It's good.
yeah,
I haven't
I
seen the
haven't read the
film
book
though.
yet. Yeah, the film's great, and it
Hmm.
parallels nicely with the Merlin series with Sam Neill and some of those characters with that as well. So that's all good stuff. But anyway, now I've just put something up on the screen. You can find Philip's work at www.perseusarcaneacademy.com.
Yeah, if you want,
As
if you feel like melting your brain, there's the Enochian course. Actually, you won't melt your brain because I'll help you,
Yeah.
which is, I suppose, the point. Um, and if you're interested in lab alchemy and you've done spagyrics, I've written something called the vegetable menstruum, which is a natural feed on from spagyrics into alchemy, because a lot of the
Mm,
materials you're used to working with in a lab can be repurposed to make the vegetable menstruum.
awesome. The alchemist on a budget, he's a practical, pragmatic person. He's looking to find new value in existing familiar things, and that's how we roll it. Uh, what are you up to tomorrow, man? You say you might be doing a bit of work. You're going to go take the dog for a walk, or you might just have a big sleep in. What's happening? What's happening the next
Well,
bunch of
I
time?
probably won't get up to about 11. Well,
Whew.
I'm a bit of a laggard. I usually get up between 9 and 10 a.m. But seeing as it's nearly 2 o'clock, I probably won't get up to about 11. Um, Tomorrow is Saturday. Um, I'm actually, because I'm running this Enochian course, I'm actually going through all the aethers again. I think I mentioned before, the last time I visited them was in, I think I finished the first aether, I think it was in 2001. And the
Mm,
30th aether I was doing in about 1993. So anyway, I've got, I better not show you because that breaks the virtue of silence. But I've got the sigils here,
mm,
and I'll probably just tomorrow, in terms of ritual magic, I'll probably just do a basic practice, a basic daily practice, and I'll
mm,
just be memorizing those sigils. Every hour or so, I'll go over to them and do them and think about them, and then go away until eventually they start coming automatically, and I can do them without looking at the paper.
mm, mm,
Once I've done that, which could take a day or a week or whatever, then I'll go and revisit that particular aether, because I've already memorized the call and stuff like that. So that's that's the. I mean, I did a zone girdling the earth thing earlier this week. This is what I mean. You know, I'm very lucky that I'm doing things I really want to do.
Mm.
But I
Starfield, come on.
yes, Starfield is kind of if you say, for example, that Aleister Crowley did a lot of heroin, um, that I would wonder if there was an obsessive compulsive nature to his addiction.
Yeah.
And I wonder sometimes, and certainly my late wife did notice that after I'd done some magic, I'd get really intense and absurdly interested in some stupid video game, which even 2 months later I no longer cared about.
Yeah, funny.
But it was a way of zoning out from what was
Yeah.
going on thanks to the magic I'd done. You know.
Mm.
But yeah, so what I'm going to do tomorrow is carry on memorizing the sigils of some governors, do a basic practice, play a bit of Starfield, then some housework. I
As you
can't
do.
do any. I might start. I've got some glucose and some apple juice and stuff. I might start another load of, but that won't take me half an hour just to get a bunch of stuff brewing for
Yeah.
alcohol production for the lab.
All right, right.
Yeah. So no, it's not a busy day really.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. You've been very generous, and what a fun conversation. You know, like we covered a bit of territory here, and so I'll rejig the thumbnail just to reflect some of what the conversation is. But I want to say thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure chatting with you, Phil.
Yeah, man.
You know,
I,
it's nice.
it's
I was getting a bit bored with Starfield, but when I saw your message, I've had enough of this now.
perfect.
You know, you get to the point. I've had enough. I want to do something else. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
nice that you agreed to bring me on. I do appreciate it.
You're most welcome, brother. You're most welcome. Well, I appreciate you, man, so much. And please go check out PerseusArcaneAcademy.com. They're a friend, and they've got a lot of Philip's work and blogs and things on there. And yeah, he's offering a course and some, I think you're offering some one-to-one instruction as well.
Yeah.
And so you'll be well looked after. And Philip has a lot of knowledge and experience in this. And so if you want to explore this, you'll be in good hands. So thank you so much, good brother Philip. I will see you next time I see you, sir.
Yep.
And
It's been a blast. I'll see you soon, Phil.
yeah, all right. Have a good sleep, man. And I'll see
Will
you
do.
next time. All right.
Cheers.
All right. Well, man, that ended up being a cool, fun talk. So thanks everyone for joining in. I'm going to stick around for a little bit longer. I'm just going to go and disappear, and I'll be back in a sec. So for those of you who are still with us, thank you so much, and I will return very shortly. All right, what's happening out there? How you guys doing? Man, that was a big chat. I thought we were only going to catch up for maybe half an hour at the most. Very generous with his time. So yeah, a lot of great stuff talked about there, and it's always fun to explore the intersection between things like gaming and movies and storytelling and immersion into provided experiences. Whether it's just for escapism or there's always harvestable value in exploring the artwork of others. And whether that's discovering the principles of the construction of the piece of art, or exploring how characters interact and how development of the world or the development of the characters build. And I think that's one of the things that games are exceptional at offering is it's a type of interactive storytelling, and that is that opens a lot of opportunities up. Like I said at the beginning, when we were talking and I was mentioning this, we had this really old computer console called it was, you plugged it into your TV. It was a ZX Spectrum, ZX81 to be specific, and it had a tape. You had to have a tape deck, and you put the tape deck in, and you put a cassette in it, and that was the game. But first of all, you had to get a book, and there was a game, and there was three games, or part of it was a series of three books, and each book had a tape with it, and there'd be a couple, 2 to 3 games that you would play, and you would read through the book and get immersed in the story, and then it was time to play the game. And so you were caught up in the story, and then you would put the cassette in, and you would enjoy this experience. So it was a natural sort of continuation of the reading experience. And back in those days, we didn't have super flash TVs and graphics and things. So you're reading a book, you're getting into the story, and then there's this game that you play, and it sort of gives you this interactive opportunity, because otherwise you're reading a book, and it's providing the parameters of the experience, and then you play the game, and then it's like, well, there's some consequence, you've got some skin in the game, if you will. And that obviously offers you, a bit of sort of recreational interaction, but you want to complete the game, like before you carry on starting the book again, which can be challenging because if you got to get good at the thing. But yeah, what's everyone doing out there? I see there's a few people in the chat. If you got any questions, please throw them up. Happy to be of service. And yeah, like I said, the great conversation with Philip talking about the intersection between, immersive storytelling in the form of games and movies and books and things. And, we talked a lot about tarot as well. And if you lay out your tarot cards, if you just lay out, like if you got a Rider-Waite deck and you lay them out from ace through to 10 of any of the suits, you can see a story unfolding there. And I think that's why the Rider-Waite deck is so good. Compared to a lot of other decks, and that's why a lot of decks have cloned the Rider-Waite deck, is that in most cases, when you're looking at the deck, they're pictures of people doing stuff. Whereas if I get the same card in, or if I just get a different card from here, this is the Thoth deck. It's not people doing stuff usually. It's a thing, like it's a set of symbols arranged in a certain way. Okay, and so when you're exploring new territory, and it may becoming overwhelmed by what you're engaging with, can be awesome and not awesome. But the more relatable it is, the more it's got some connectivity, some familiarity to it, that you go, oh yeah, okay, oh wow, that leads to something else that I'm not aware of. And that's how you can sort of bridge uncertainty with certainty. And that's why I really love, for example, this deck here, this tarot deck, which is the Rider-Waite deck, because it shows pictures of people doing things. So when, one of the reasons why people are maybe a bit hesitant about exploring tarot, especially from the if they've never experienced anything to do with any of the mystery schools, etc., they hear the word tarot and it's a bit occulty and weird, and it might do bad things, and I might get this thing and the other. Well, you can break it down for them. Obviously, shock entertainment nowadays, if somebody's wanting to make a shocking YouTube video, they'll put all the scary cards out, which there's like 5 or 6 of them, and they're just representations of things, and they have to be presented in a certain way, in a sense, because there's an impactfulness that's attempting to be conveyed. But once again, like if you're a meditator and you want to take your meditation further, you may, oh, hang on, it says my live broadcast is going to end. That's unfortunate. Oh, how stink. Why is that? Well, I'm going to come back on. Hang on.